And I believe the reason that the government is fighting the Starlink is not necessarily because they actually care about the triple BEE status. They don't want the rural community to be enlightened through the internet, because we have seen in metros that when people have access to the internet and they've got access to resources, they are less likely to vote for a communist or socialist political party.
Feel the heat. No holding back, no playing it safe. We're taking up space, we're setting the pace. Louder than ever. Here we come. Unfiltered AF.
Today we have a super exciting episode, and guys, South Africa might hate us or might love us for this one, but I know what my opinion is regarding our guest today, and this is really a pivotal moment for Unfiltered, based on the fact that we are here to support the small business owner in South Africa, to inspire, but it's not without its challenges. South Africa is one of the most difficult places currently to run a business, and for various reasons: political reasons, religious reasons, even how America currently affects business in South Africa due to rising costs of fuel, cost of oil. We've got we've got interesting commentary regarding Ramaphosa and Phala Phala. I'm not going to give my viewpoint on it, but we've got an expert in the house today, and that is Renaldo Gouws. Renaldo, thank you so much for joining us on Unfiltered today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be on your show, and thank you for the wonderful work that you guys do. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Renaldo. I think I need to extend the thanks because you're not taking any prisoners. You are saying it as it is. I can see there your studio behind you. It says SEC. So, and everybody knows you for that SEC right now. It's like when things go wrong, it's like SEC.
Yeah, I think that, the people of this country have had enough. I would argue that South Africans are some of the toughest people on earth because of the fact, that we've gone through decades of oppression, and now we are going through decades of corruption and maladministration. And yet, if you speak to your average South African, they are so proud of this country. They are proud to be South African. And that speaks to something that transcends politics. That speaks to the nature of who we are as South Africans, regardless of your skin color, regardless of your cultural background. First and foremost, being a South African is very important to us, and we are very proudly South African.
Yes, Renaldo, and you're touching on a very interesting topic here. And the nature of our conversation today is: how difficult is it currently to run a business in South Africa, but also the small business owner in South Africa is the backbone of our economy as well. So Renaldo, from your point of view, I know that you had political alliances with a certain political party. I know things have happened in your life that has changed and altered the course of your future as well. But you didn't let that get you down. You made a decision to stand up for still what you believe in South Africa. Isn't that true?
Yes. So 2 years ago, my life was turned upside down, after 13 years of committed working for a political party and moving up its ranks. Unfortunately, mainstream media decided to, try a smear campaign at me, and I didn't think that the political party would bite at that, but unfortunately they did. It's a blessing in disguise looking at it now. It's freed me up. It's allowed me to be an unfiltered version of myself. Excuse the pun of the show, of course. I think that it's given me a lot of freedom. There are still some things that I regret, in the sense that I would have loved to have been part of this impeachment committee in Parliament. I would have caused a lot of chest pains and headaches for a lot of ministers and members of Parliament over there. But I do think ultimately perhaps it just wasn't my time at that point in time. Hopefully sometime in the future an opportunity will come up where I can serve the people of the country over there. But yeah, exactly the point that you are raising here. Initially the country relied heavily on taxpayers' money, and now it seems that that can't plug plug the holes. So now the government is coming after small businesses, and what they don't realize is this is just going to impact the country even more negatively than before, because usually the people that started their small businesses was because of the fact that they didn't want to work with the government, but now the government is involving themselves in the private sector as well.
Exactly. So Ronaldo, on that, what is the psychology? And I think this is where there's a nice collaboration between the two of you now, between Dr. T and yourself, Ronaldo. What's the psychology of what forced the average South African moving into starting their own business? Why did that happen?
Well, look, I mean, there's multiple reasons for different people's situations in life, but I think a lot of people decided to open their own businesses because of the limitations that the government placed on employment. We've got 142 race-based laws in this country that discriminate directly against you based on the color of your skin. It's not only white people, it's also colored people and Indian people that are discriminated against. So people decided to take their life into their own hands, and for their family's sakes and for the community's sake, decided to start at small businesses. And to a large extent, the private sector is driven by small to medium enterprises. And unfortunately, now that people have freed themselves from government control, now the government is once again involving themselves. I mean, we all know that government passed legislation that if you are a small business that employ more than 50 people, suddenly you have to adhere to these triple BEE scorecards now. And ultimately, that is just going to cause more unemployment, because as a small business owner, we are on that threshold, and I can guarantee you that I'm not going to risk doing business with the government or having to adhere to their racist legislation, because that is how I see it. So unfortunately, in order to not comply, I will have to then perhaps dismiss one or two or three people in order to not meet that threshold. Now, imagine if thousands of companies are doing that across the country. That's hundreds of thousands of people that are going to be unemployed, not because of the business owners, but because of the government themselves.
So, Tracy, from your point of view, Renaldo is also talking about a component of control here, where the government wants to control small businesses because they couldn't control certain employment sectors anymore, whereas the typical South African went into business for themselves to avoid this situation, to earn an income. Now Renaldo is saying that there's more control, and we can see it. It's evident. It's public knowledge that there's more control on the small business, medium businesses as well. So from your point of view, what does this do to the emotional well-being, to the sentiment we're currently experiencing in South Africa? I know there's other countries in the world where they say this is the country to live in because it's the happiest country in the world and so forth. And I know South Africa also tops that scale somewhere based on other research I've seen before. But from your point of view, what does this control do to the typical South African?
Well, as Renaldo was saying, it limits us in our thinking. And if it's continuous and it carries on for long enough, we eventually stop innovating. And so lack of performance in a company can lead to retrenchment, can lead to non-performance and being fired, losing your job. But I just want to take this back a little, if I may, Renaldo, and I have become a viewer of yours through a mentor introduction. And one day I was so frustrated at the systems that are not working around us that I thought, who can I phone? Who can I vent to? What can I say? What can I do? Renaldo. And you picked up the phone call as it rang, without knowing who was on the other side of the call, why you were being called from this random number. It could have been anybody, it could have been about anything. And it really brought out that human side of you, which people don't see in politics, because politics, in your political arena, and I'm hoping that you will go back into politics, because we need outspoken advocates like yourself. We need change, desperately need change for the small business people in particular, but also for people like you who have been exposed on a public stage where the narrative, the group judgment doesn't necessarily fit the wrongdoing. And an exposure to that extent can have incredibly difficult setbacks for you in your life. So for you just to pick up that phone call, I mean, that was incredible. I'm sure you won't remember me. It was a while ago, but
I do remember it vividly.
Do you remember that? And we could have had a good story there. It disappeared very quickly, though, off all the social media pages, so we had no real evidence to start with. However, this type of thing is coming up all the time, and this is what is affecting the psyche of our small business people who have perhaps been excluded from job opportunities, or who have perhaps experienced exactly what we were talking about, what you were talking about. And with small business people constantly fearing rejection, constantly fearing their safety, the safety of themselves and their families in this system, it can have very negative a very negative impact, and people can fall out the system. We've got a lot of alcoholism, we've got a lot of drug addiction, and this is because people feel that they no longer belong. They don't no longer belong in a group, in their group. And it also goes to cultures. You know, when you're looking at group cultures, you can have a group who will read the Constitution around what you can and can't say and hate speech in one way, and you'll read a community understanding and it'll be a completely different interpretation. So I think there's a whole lot going on here, and I think Renaldo's got a lot that can help the small business person, and how we can get beyond those limitations, those human limitations that are forced on us through control, or that we force on ourselves eventually because we start believing the narrative.
So Renaldo, with the GNU that was formed a while ago, everybody was excited for the reason that things are going to change. Now, from the outside, it looked like it's going to change. But what do you think is happening from the inside that's really affecting where we find ourselves today, and especially in terms of the business owner?
So I think initially people were just so ecstatic with the fact that the ANC did not have a majority anymore. So everybody was thinking, well, you know, the GNU must surely be better than the ANC governing alone. And I would say initially when it started and the ministers were announced, people were optimistic, and even, you know, the private sector was optimistic because you could see how the rand was doing and how, you know, stocks were trading in this country. And then, you know, after a couple of months, people started asking, where's the change? Because we had the foot and mouth disease outbreak in the Department of Agriculture. We've had numerous ministers that's not ANC that, you know, have also made mistakes. For instance, the latest one is Solly Malatsi with the AI policy, where the AI policy is to prevent people from abusing AI. And then that's exactly what they did with the policy that created false references. So I think the sentiment around the GNU right now is that people aren't happy with it. People are disappointed. They expected a lot more. Now, whether the, you know, psychology behind the expectations can be discussed here, we can unpack it. But I think people were just expecting better. And unfortunately, we have not seen that. And this has also then moved over into the private sector, because businesses are also now unsure, because we expected the economy to grow. We expected like-minded people that are now ministers to go and say, well, the job of government is not to create jobs. The job of the government is to create the environment where jobs are created. And if you look at the amount of red tape that's being implemented, if you look at the race-based legislation, if you look at the new triple BEE policies that are being implemented, the government is focused more than ever on creating more red tape rather than just opening the market up and playing more of an oversight role. So as long as the government does this, then firstly, people aren't going to be happy with the GNU, and secondly, people aren't going to be happy with the state of South Africa. So it's a cascading effect.
So on that, Ronaldo, the question I want to ask you, and Tracy can also then answer from a psychological point of view, why do you think the government is executing this level of control where they actually want to throttle or choke businesses in South Africa? Why? Hoekom?
It's very simple. The government does not want people in this country to not be dependent on them. Because the moment the people become independent and they don't rely on the social grant, or they don't rely on government's involvement in tender processes, then that is when people become free. And that is when they can then decide to not vote for the political party that has been governing this country for the last 32 years. So I would say that it is just control. The government wants to control what happens in this country. They don't actually want this country to thrive without it. So it's one of those situations of, we can either choose that this country thrives, but then, the governing party, the majority party in this country, the ANC, will lose more and more support. And you can also just see that as an example with Starlink. Now, think about this for a second. Starlink is willing to give 5,000 schools in the rural communities access to the internet. Now, MTN and Vodacom and other companies through the government could not have achieved this, otherwise it would have been done. I think the value of that was worth, you can correct me, it's either 5 million rand or 50 million rand. It's one of the two.
It's 50.
50, yeah.
Right, it's 50 million. I was also leaning towards 50. So Starlink is willing to come and provide tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of rural community children with access to the internet. And I believe the reason that the government is fighting the Starlink is not necessarily because they actually care about the triple BEE status. They don't want the rural community to be enlightened through the internet, because we have seen in metros that when people have access to the internet and they've got access to resources, they are less likely to vote for a communist or socialist political party. And so I think that the battle here is a psychological battle. I don't think that it's necessarily just about the 30% BEE status. It is literally about keeping people under control and threatening them, because the old argument used for the last 20 years was, if you vote for a different political party, they are going to bring back apartheid. Now, that has died a slow death because people realize that apartheid won't come back. So now the new angle that the majority party is using, well, if you vote for somebody else, then your social grants will be taken away. So it's all about education. And of course, ultimately, the government just wants to maintain control at all costs, because that is what communist and socialist organizations do.
So they will impoverish and take away certain freedom, access to communities because of control, and it's just shocking for the small business owner who needs to operate at certain levels of cost. But Tracy, on this, the control Ronaldo's once again referring to. Why does the government not want to relinquish control? Because isn't there this philosophy that if you do let go, you will also flourish even more? Even the government will then flourish more if they do give a certain level of freedom. Isn't it true? Or help me, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, there's so many aspects to this and so many ways that we can look at it, particularly in the political arena. But with us talking as we are now, I find that when you have a group who are following a particular activism, the leaders who lead the group are the ones who are creating the control. The ones behind who are following often don't know what the argument is about, because there is that lack of education. And that increases the power. And we're all about power wielding in this country. I mean, you look at Parliament and the way it operates. Anybody who reacts to anything that's said and is emotionally reactive in a situation is immediately isolated. They're isolated. They're not included in that discussion or wherever it's moving forward to. So that's why very little can actually be settled in Parliament in any one discussion. Everybody is too reactive, and then that isolates that group and that isolates that group. But definitely the control is in the front, and it's very specifically led down from the top to the front, and the people behind who are following don't know.
You can see this play out exactly as what you've stated, with the fact that there's a lot of symbolism that takes place in Parliament. If you look at the way that the Umkhonto we Sizwe party dresses, they dress in military outfits. Then if you look at the EFF, they dress as domestic workers and as miners, but then they wear Louis Vuitton shoes or Guess shoes. And this is to create a mental image, a psychological image of what this party is and what it fights for. But then the irony in all of this is let's use the EFF as an example, and let's link it to businesses. You see that the EFF stands in Parliament and they wear a domestic worker outfit and a miner's outfit because they are for the workers. But then when they go and protest, they go and shut down small businesses. And then what happens is these small businesses ultimately lose a lot of income, and then they have to get rid of the lower income bracket workers that work for them. So this is a situation of a political party that says that they are fighting for something, but they're doing everything in their power to cause those people that they want to represent then to lose their jobs. We've seen this with Clicks, we've seen this with Dischem, we've seen this with private companies that the EFF go to, and then they protest outside or they threaten the owners there. And then subsequently what you find is because of the things that they've caused at those businesses, there is a lot of dismissals that take place in order to keep the doors of the business open.
Yeah, it means a lot of loss of jobs in the small business sector.
Well, like you said, the government's role is to create the environment, and all these factions are causing a very toxic environment. Once again, for control and so forth. But getting to our next question, and I watched your commentary was it a week or two ago when there was the sentencing of Julius Malema. So that was also a pivotal point for our political climate in South Africa. And obviously opinions are broad and all over the show pertaining to that one. But do you think there is something in South Africa that is still working, or is there still a system that's been circumvented with what happened there and what's happening there?
Well, the irony, of course, is that the best functioning organ of the state in South Africa is SARS, and I wonder why that is the case. You know, if you look at state-owned enterprises, you look at Eskom and you go, okay. You look at Transnet and you go, okay. And then you look at SARS and it's world class. It is at the bleeding edge of technology. And ultimately what you see there is that the government has already shown you what they focus on and what is important to them. And that is why for them, the focus is to collect as much money as possible from the people that are left over in this country. Because when I was a councillor, when I started in 2016, my office would get probably about 3 or 4 proof of addresses a week, meaning somebody comes in because they need a proof of address from me because they are applying for a passport or for a visa, and then they leave the country. By my last month, when I was a councillor before I went to Parliament for that brief stint, I was receiving probably about 10 to 15 a day, and it was lawyers, it was dentists, it was nurses, it was doctors. These people are leaving this country in droves because they don't believe that the GNU or the ANC majority government cares about the people or about businesses in South Africa. So ultimately, I've got a lot of hope for this country because there's still a lot of things that can be turned around within 5 years. You know, this country has not is not at the point where it's complete destruction. So there's a lot that can still be salvaged and fixed. And within 10, 15 years, we can be a Singapore of Africa. But unfortunately, there is not a lot that is working right now. The justice system seems to be working again, finally. I remember there was a lot of anger towards the Constitutional Court after the Kill the Boer ruling, saying that it's not hate speech, but yet the same Constitutional Court found a piece of cloth in the old South African flag hate speech. So there's this contradiction and there's this double standard of what is hate speech and what is not. I do think that private enterprise and private companies are fulfilling the role of what the government should be doing. And you are seeing this every day more and more. You are seeing more private individuals doing neighborhood watches, private security filling the void of the SAPS. And to an extent, that is creating more business because, you know, the more security companies we have, the more people that are employed. So I do believe that the private sector has stepped up and they are doing the government's job. So for every story we have of a failed government institution, we have got a success story of a company that has come up to fill that void. I think the biggest example of this, besides all the companies that are doing solar panels and installing solar, other than that, the biggest one is the post office. The post office, I don't even know if people use the post office anymore besides going to license their cars or renewing their licenses. Other than that, if you look at all these small companies that have now taken over the parcel delivery system, I think that is just another case of how the private sector is doing the job of the government.
And like you rightly said, my next question would have been, if government's not going to rescue the South African economy, and we should be honest that probably will not, who will? And you just answered that as well, who will? It will be the innovative South Africa who says there's an opportunity. But there is a contradiction to that as well. So the reality is our tax money needs to pay for certain services. It needs to pay for our security. It needs to pay for certain postal services, like you rightly said. But the reality is that African is resilient and says that we're gonna fill this gap. There is an opportunity to make income, but so that a system can continue running as well effectively. So in saying that, do you think the South African business owner, if you put them in any place in the world, do you think their creativity outshines most probably any other country in this world?
Yes, I do believe so. And I think that it's because of the hardships that the government has created that has brought about the ingenuity of this South African entrepreneur. I mean, I know that I'm not a big fan of claiming overseas people as South Africans, but if you look at the South Africans that we have produced, I mean, the wealthiest person in the world and the one that is literally reinventing the way that rockets leave the earth and the plans for the moon and Mars, Elon Musk is a South African. Then if you look at the first person that went to space, it's Mark Shuttleworth. Well, I mean the first I think private citizen that went into space with Mark Shuttleworth. The first successful heart transplant, was done in South Africa by a South African. So yes, I am perhaps a little bit biased because I am South African, but I do think that our entrepreneurs in this country, if you can make it in South Africa, you can make it anywhere.
So from a root foundation, this has actually catapulted the South African to be innovative, to be creative, to say that we're not going to lie down. We are going to not fight the system, but we are going to resist certain systems in place to ensure that we do move forward. So Tracy, just from your point of view, why did the South African adapt so amazingly to be able to say, listen, I'm going to start a business, come hell or high water. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I don't have the funding. There's 143 race-based laws, whatever that number is. But I'm going to start a business in South Africa. Nou, jy moet mal wees om dit te wil doen with all the odds against you, like it's 80% against and 20% for. I don't know what that number is. That's just a thumbs up number. But help me understand, why are South Africans actually crazy in doing this, or why? What's going on, Tracy?
I find there are three groups who start businesses. First of all, we have the very young group they're just born innovative, and they're thinking to themselves, what on earth, what kind of world have you left us with? We're going to do something on our own. And those are the people that we really have to nurture and help to build up, because those are the people the youngsters, who are going to keep the world, well, South Africa certainly, moving in the right direction and evolving. The second lot are people who've experienced trauma in a job loss situation, or a retrenchment, or a public exposure if they've had their own business. I myself have just recently been through something similar, and so that is why I identify well with what Renaldo and so many other people have been through. And you've got to take a step back. You have to understand that this is just something that has happened. It doesn't identify who you are. It doesn't take away the identity of who you are, but it disrupts your thinking. So it disrupts your previous belief system, and it makes you understand exactly who you are and what this has taught you to do and move forward with and work towards. And I find that a lot of people in the sort of 30 to 50 category, 50-year age category, are falling into that, where they're saying, but we know what it used to be like, let's innovate something to fill that gap. And they're doing that. Most small businesses fail within the first short while, 5 years to 8 years, and that is because they don't get the support that they needed in our system. They don't necessarily have that support. But nonetheless, every time it's a failing forward. Okay, now I know what I didn't do, I know what I've learned from this, let's go and try something else. And we have so much resilience as South Africans. We have incredibly high resilience. And if we can build our emotional endurance, that's where you find the breakthrough will come through in innovation, creativity, and going forward. And eventually, when certain laws are done away with, we'll be able to re-employ youngsters, young people, unemployed people who have the skill to fill those positions. At the moment, it's being made very difficult for the small business person, incredibly difficult. And so we loathe to take on anybody on a permanent basis. We'd rather employ people on a short-term basis because of the risks to management and business owners and the business itself.
So the reality is there are so many avenues to be able to offer employment. Freelancing, you offer employment. There's structures in place that one can utilize. But Renaldo, quickly give us one policy change, realistic and achievable, that would unlock the most immediate value for the small South African entrepreneur, if it happens tomorrow.
Well, I would say the policy that would drastically change it overnight is the policy that is the latest one that they've implemented with racial quotas according to the demographics of the country in order to employ. A great example of this is I live in the Eastern Cape, and the Eastern Cape has got a white population of 7.5%. But if you look at Nelson Mandela Bay has got 18% white population. So now, according to the government targets, you have to adhere to the provincial targets. So that means that by implementing the provincial target, they are not adhering actually to the legislation because of the percentage of white people and colored people that aren't equal to what the provincial target is. So by just removing that, it's not a question of, the race of the person, although in this instance it is, but it will create the opportunity perhaps for that white individual or colored individual to create a company, start a company, and then employ a bunch of people. What really fascinates me is that in a country that's got a broad unemployment rate of 45% and a youth unemployment rate of over 60%, the fact that they are doubling down on legislation rather than removing legislation and the red tape is what I think is really frustrating to a lot of potential entrepreneurs, but also people that would love to enter the job market, but they can't purely because of the legislation that exists. So if they just remove the latest example that I think has done the most damage and will do the most damage over the next couple of years, I think if they remove that, that'll immediately perhaps reduce the unemployment rate in this country by perhaps even as much as 5%.
Sure.
By just changing the environment once again with one policy change. I would love us to have another hour of conversation here, and this is so profound coming from you, especially who's experiencing this from the inner workings of Parliament, the inner workings of government. But to start wrapping this up, Renaldo, you're obviously advocating for a better South Africa. Like Tracy initially introduced you as well to our viewers. So what is next, Renaldo? What's going to happen next? I know currently there's been a bit of a shift with our legal system and with what happened yesterday with Phala Phala and so forth. What is that going to affect? How's that going to affect the future of the business owner in South Africa, going this way or going that way, whatever those two ways are?
So I think what needs to happen as a matter of urgency is that people, and this might sound, I won't mention political parties, but I'll mention ideology. I think it's time that people move away from communism and socialism as the answer, because if you look from 1994 up until now, the communist, socialist organizations and political parties have enjoyed between 62 to 65% of the support of the voters. And that is whether it's the ANC, the EFF, MK, it doesn't matter. It's always remained 62 to 65% communist. And what we need is the internet in rural communities. We need people to go out and educate the individuals that don't really know what's going on. Because if we have this standard in this country where people have grown accustomed to accepting the least amount that they could possibly get and be happy for that. An example of that is a social grant. People are satisfied with the government if they get a social grant. And that is the standard that was set by the government. I think what needs to happen is we as South Africans need to tell people that there are better alternatives out there. And my personal opinion on this is that we need to move away from socialist and communist policies and political parties, and to an extent, even liberal parties, because we can see what is happening in the UK. We can see what happened in the United States under a liberal political party. Same with Australia, same with Canada. We need to move back to what makes South Africa great. Our different cultures, our different languages. We need to embrace that, and we need to say we are conservative. 85% of the population of this country are Christian. That means that 85% of this population are conservative. We need to move back to family values. We need to move back to where you can raise a child in a community, or a community can raise the child, meaning that we should allow communities to thrive. We should allow cultures to be who and what they are. And unfortunately, socialism, communism, and liberalism doesn't want any of those things. They focus on the individual, or they focus on state control. So people need to realize that with the elections, you can change the trajectory of this country. And in my humble opinion, the way that we do that is by moving towards a conservative base again, where we value our cultures, our languages, our faith, our families, family values. And when we do that, you'll find that the policies that will come out of that will be for the betterment of all South Africans and not just some.
Agreed.
So Renaldo, this is a mammoth task, and it's not going to change within a month or a year or two. What can community members do? What can the small business owner do to start making a shift? Is there anything they can do?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I was a counselor, what really made my life easier as a politician and what helped force the hand of the municipality was when business owners came together and said, this is the amount of rates and taxes that we contribute towards the fiscus of the municipality. and this is the services that you've rendered to us. So there's many ways in which business owners as well as residents can put pressure on the municipality, and that is by coming together, creating organizations. I mean, we had a neighborhood watch in my ward that managed to get about 50 CCTV cameras up in an area that was really hit hard with crime. And because of that initiative that was driven by the business owners and by the entrepreneurs, that crime went down by 90% after those cameras were put up. So that is just one example. Another example of this is create a community group with a couple of businesses that could sponsor perhaps Gatfall. I don't know if you guys have it over there, but over here we've got a pothole mix called Gatfall that you buy in the bucket, and then you can go and fill potholes. So what I would say is this is a great opportunity for small businesses and entrepreneurs as well, because if you get involved in the community and you assist, and your company sponsors, let's say, a couple of pothole mixes, or you have a soup kitchen, or you do something that the government is failing, that not only brings the community closer, but it also allows your business to thrive. Because what is better advertisement for your business to show that you actually care about your community and the people that support your business?
Exactly. And I like the Gatfall concept. I think three out of our 5 conversations today we've had, a pothole was center of our discussions as well. So I love that initiative, Renaldo. I think it's something we need to start this side. I think Unfiltered is going to start driving a Gatfall project this side, want ons is Gatfall. Gatfall om bande te verloor ook. So Renaldo, let's wrap it up. What's next for you? I see you're busy in politics again. Yeah, there's something happening there. What's next for Renaldo? How's Renaldo going to make his contribution to help change South Africa as well?
So after a year of my membership being terminated with my previous political party, I took the year to assess other political parties, and then I saw, it was almost as if the stars were aligning, because I've always been a follower and a fan of Corné Mulder, Dr. Corné Mulder from the Freedom Front Plus. So when he became the leader of the Freedom Front Plus, that is immediately when I reached out and I said, listen, I've been out of politics for a year now, but I love what you are doing and I'd like to form part of it. And then that is when I decided to join the Freedom Front Plus. And what's next? Well, I am standing in our municipality as a councillor candidate, and hopefully I can get back into a similar position that I had before I left for Parliament. But the goal here is hopefully to become a mayoral committee member. I've got a wealth of knowledge in economic development, tourism. And I think that is where I can make the biggest difference. I think that Nelson Mandela Bay has got a lot of potential when it comes to tourism, and also the fact that we are the motor industry hub of South Africa. So there's a lot of development that can take place here economically and also for tourists. So that is the goal. The goal is to get back into council, and then to make a difference on a mayoral committee level. Whether I'll go back to Parliament, we'll see what happens in the future, but I just want to improve the metro that I live in, and hopefully I'll be given an opportunity sometime in the future to fight for South Africans in Parliament.
Tracy, any last comments from your side?
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you on this forum, and I'd like to thank you, Elkin, and your team for inviting me on. I don't think there was very much that I could add in here, because Renaldo said much of what was pertinent to the conversation, and it was really, really good to talk to you. I hope that we get the opportunity again soon.
Yeah, for sure.
And I do hope that we have more individuals like you who have perhaps had a traumatic time in politics and go back into it knowing more, understanding more, and making a better difference, a bigger difference.
Well, thank you, Tracy. It's greatly appreciated, and I do fondly remember the phone call we had. So I'll keep that private. But and thank you for the work that you guys are also doing. And like I said, alternative media, I think, is going to play a pivotal part in the future of South Africa and the conversations that we are having. So well done also for for this podcast. It's great, and we need more voices. I know that I'm probably one of the biggest South African political commentators right now, but I don't want to be alone. I want more people to form part of this. So the more the merrier. We can't trust mainstream media anymore, unfortunately. They've got agendas that they've got to drive. And maybe if I put my conspiracy hat on, remember, the most important thing for a mainstream media outlet is not the news. It's first to turn a profit for their shareholders, and then the news comes after that. So I think voices like ours are really, really important, and more people are tuning in. I mean, last night when the president spoke, I had more people on my live stream than the SABC had on theirs, and that tells us that we are moving in the right direction. So thanks for what you are doing, and long may it continue, and let's see what happens with that.
Renaldo, thank you so much, and thank you for your voice. Thank you for standing up as well, despite challenges, despite facing adversity, that you are fighting for a better South Africa, and you are fighting for the South African citizen, but the South African business owner as well. As a business owner myself of multiple businesses, we know it's tough. Our objective is to see how can we raise youngsters, how can we raise the youth in business as well, and give them the opportunity they do deserve. So, Renaldo, you're an inspiration. Thank you for your voice. It was lovely chatting to you as well, and we wish you all the best with your campaigning, with moving forward, where you can actually have a much larger voice than the huge voice you already have. So thank you so much for that, Renaldo. Loved spending this almost hour with you, and excited to see what the future holds. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Awesome. You too, Renaldo.
Ciao, ciao.
So that was a very unique episode with Renaldo Gouws and with Dr. T, our resident clinical psychologist. You're going to see a lot more of Tracy as well, Dr. Tracy. She's going to pass comment on interviews like this on what is happening with the psyche of the business owner as well, and how can you actually improve that as a business owner. So please stay tuned. I want to encourage you, please like and share, subscribe this channel so that this can become a major voice in South Africa as well, that serves as inspiration, that can have guests like Renaldo on, that inspires the business owner, because we know South Africa is difficult currently to run a business. It's difficult to just live in South Africa currently, but that you are resilient, we are resilient, and that we're not going to give up, and it's not going to go down without a proverbial fight. So thank you so much. Like, share, subscribe, and see you next time. Cheers.
Feel the heat. No holding back, no playing it safe. We're taking up space, we're setting the pace. Louder than ever.